Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. For me, the honor to present a bit on our activities in the Netherlands. Some slides that we prepared about personal data in the Dutch context. As we are in Amsterdam, virtually at least, I would like to explain a bit about why we are so active here also in the personal data field. It's material that I prepared together also with Marlies. And feel free to jump in any questions. I'm sure that Marlies or anybody will bring them out. It can also be in between to clarify stuff. Let's check my watch. So personal data in the Dutch context. Why at all is this relevant? And we yesterday also we made up quite a few use cases relevant to the Corona case, but also without that, enough things that are of importance to us. But before we do a brief introduction to my company, to Innovalor, we're a small advisory and software company located in the Netherlands. We advise governments as well as private organizations on data-driven developments. So what the impact of data and innovation is. And we also built great software, and we won several prizes for that we are quite proud of, I must confess. But then back to the essence. Why is data or personal data of importance? In the Netherlands only, we're a country of 70 million people. 2.3 million households have overdue payments, so they have difficulties in paying the bills on a weekly or a monthly basis. 1.4 of those households have really problematic debts, and many of those problems are not known to the government. The people suffer secretly, they suffer by themselves, and they don't share that information. And this is not only a problem for the people themselves, it has a big societal cost. And these are figures that come from the National Banking Agency. They have estimated that societal cost is about 11 billion euros in the Netherlands alone. And especially if people that are in a debt situation are not taken care of well enough, a small debt of a few thousand euros can lead to a 40,000 euro debt with 15 different organizations on average. So the cost of being in debt rise very spectacularly in a negative sense if people end up in such a situation. Well, why is this relevant to my data, and why am I bringing this example forward? This is one of the examples where data can be of help, because government has a lot of data on those people, on the person. They know what the rent is, they know what kind of allowances or surtaxes the people get in different situations, so they know what's actually going on. They know how what constitutes the family, and they know your study loan. So a lot of data is known within the government, but within the government in a broad sense. And the government is not a single entity, not in the Netherlands at least. Also, companies know a lot about us. They know about our buying habits. They know about our loans. They know what the status is of our bank accounts. They know about our online payments. They know about how much heating we use, and so on and so on. But this data is not shared, and it's not shared on the control of the people, of the households, of the citizens, and it's not used to prevent such difficult situations like people with problematic debts. And that's also why the whole idea of preventing debts is one of the key use cases concerning personal data in the Netherlands, and it has been over the last few years. But still, a breakthrough is still lacking. And we know that in the private sector also we are quite well able to combine personal data and big data and do smart things with it. Maybe a strange example, but this is a website in the Netherlands where you can buy car insurances. And I filled in that I have a Toyota Prius, and where I live here in Enschede. And it suggests to me that my best offer is an offer that costs 49 euros and 74 cents per month. And they've used my personal data. They use the data of my car, who I am, my age, my driving history, a bit of that, to give me that offer. And they also know my risk profile and what's going on. Because if I would fill in the same car, but then with the data of my oldest son, he's 19 years of age, he's an excellent driver, but he's 19 years, lives at the same place and has the same car, we would have to get a car insurance of 237 euros per month. So in this case, personal data and big data is used to better understand what the services should be and to create a better service proposition to me. So it's very well possible to use data in a way that we can do smart things with it. At the same time, we see a lot of controversy in the Netherlands. Sorry for the Dutch screenshot that we have here, but there's, for example, there's the whole idea of doing smart stuff with data, call it algorithms, is becoming more and more suspicious in the Netherlands. People want to have, politics wants to get in control of algorithms and to know what kind of algorithms are being used within all kinds of contexts. I was raised as a computer scientist back in the 80s, so the whole algorithm bashing that's now going on is quite difficult for me, because I know the power of algorithms, and everything we do with computers is based on algorithms, is based on decision rules and things like. So the whole idea that now not only Corona is that viruses are not only suspicious, but also algorithms are suspicious and bad, is something that I find very challenging in this context. But at the same time, we also see experiments. There's an experiment in a small city in the Netherlands where people, by sharing their personal data concerning their houses, would get a reduction in their rent of more than 40%. So on the one hand, data and sharing data and doing things with it is suspect. On the other hand, is also promoted by government. So we really see two different approaches to the use of data. So what do we have here now? Is this actually an opportunity, or is it a problem? Is it an opportunity that we can combine big data and learning about everything we know about people with personal data and getting better services out, or is it a problem? Well, to me, it's more an opportunity than a problem. But for that, of course, we would like to zoom in on the aspect of the personal data side, because that's what we're here for when we won't go into big data. So let's look into personal data management. Then we come to this picture, and it's the MyData basic picture in its latest form that we discussed yesterday in the operator workshop. When we talk about personal data and personal data sharing, we have data sources that hold data services that want to use that data. And in the human-centric universe that we promote as MyData, the person is supported by an operator to help in ensuring that data is used in a proper way, or sent or applied by the data using service through the operator. So this is the universe, or the world that I would like to dive into a bit further. And it's not a world with a operator and a data source. No, it's an ecosystem of many operators, many data sources, and many data using services. Move this one up. So let's go a bit further in it. We have the ecosystem of operators and data using services and data sources. If you dive into the field of what's going on in personal data, be it in the Netherlands or in a European setting or a worldwide setting, we see that many of those ecosystems are rooted in trust frameworks. And trust frameworks are the sets of rules and regulations that govern such an ecosystem. They tell, both on a tactical level, but also on a functional level, and sometimes even on a business level, how the ecosystem can work. Examples are Findy in Finland. I'll give some examples. MedMay in the Netherlands, or the Key Trust Framework, or the MyData framework that have been in existence for more than a decade now. Those trust frameworks are based on legislations, and they need to comply to different legislations. Obviously, in the European setting, you have to comply to the GDPR, but there can also be legislations that are relevant in a certain sector. It can be PSD2 for the financial sector. It could be some financial legislation that's of importance, and so on. And what we see with many of our partners also, that there's a lot of confusion of what now is actually going on. What are solutions? What are operators? What is a trust framework? And also what's going on around it? What kind of developments are existing in context, and what kind of technologies actually support these kind of ecosystems? And this was the reason why we did quite a few studies on all the concepts and the technologies and the programs that we saw passing by, in order to get a bit of order, or a bit less chaos in the whole conceptual world of personal data and MyData. And that led to this picture with all kinds of technologies, trust frameworks, but also a whole list of proto operators that we also have used in the MyData operator paper, and that we're extending continuously together with the rest of the thematic group to better understand what is actually going on. And a lot of things going on in the context of personal data, a lot of groups that are working on it, a lot of new technologies keep on popping up, or all the technologies even that are relevant. And it's quite difficult for most of the people that we encounter to understand what the role of different things is and how they relate to one another. So I would like to share a few of the elements, and with the focus on the Dutch situation of this ecosystem with you. First of all, let's focus on the middle part. Let's say the trust frameworks and the operators that are in there. You only look to the Dutch situation, we already have a very diverse group of initiatives that are related to it. Some are quite old, starting from the year 2006, for example, the initiatives at the Key Foundation. Some are very new, which is the latest one, I guess, in this. Might be MedMay, or no, might be even very new. Some are originated from, let's say, a group of companies or a sector, like, for example, all my insurances in a row. And some come from government, like an overview of pensions. And it must be said that this overview is quite dynamic. Things that have been in place that we studied 2 years ago are disappearing already. So initiatives that started and were quite promising have disappeared already. And even a big initiative by the insurance companies concerning, for example, gathering all your insurance policies in one spot has been stopped only months after it has started. So the whole field of initiatives that is quite dynamic, and there are very few initiatives that have survived and have indeed become successful. So what we did in our research in the Netherlands, together with our partners also in the digital research program, is that we tried to better understand what actually were the components inside of the different solutions, as well as what were the success factors of the different solutions. And to illustrate a bit of that work, a very complex sheet that I won't go into details, we created a reference model that we're now improving in the context of the MyData operator workshop, a reference model with all the different functional components that can be part of a personal data management solution, including governance, but also consent management or permission management, and so on and so on. And we try to pinpoint what the different solutions had in common or where they differed. And these are two well-known Dutch solutions. One is Irma, I'll be going into detail later, and the other one is Octo in the financial sector. And when you dive into it, at first appearance, they might be very similar, but we try to identify what the differences and similarities were. We sent out a survey to all the operators, the total operators in the Netherlands that we knew of. They were filled in by the people themselves, and they allowed us to compile this kind of overviews of how different operators or solutions relate, including elements of their business model and the way they are governed. So that helped us in creating a much better understanding, and also it helped us a lot in creating an even better picture for the reference model that we're now working on in the thematic group for the operators. But these were the kind of insights that we got from that. But there was a second question that we wanted to answer as well, and that's the question: why are there no widely accepted solutions for personal data management? So if people started to work on this already more than 15 to 16 years ago, why isn't personal data management well accepted? And why don't we all use interoperable solutions to personal data management? Why don't we all have a wallet that works nicely and where we can share our health data or our financial data? And in our research, we came up with a number of important aspects for acceptance of different solutions. One thing was, one very important insight is that, well, there's often a claim that a first mover advantage. If you move first into the market, the winner takes it all. In this case, there's no such thing. A first mover into the area of personal data sharing or personal data management, they were really facing with the problem that personal data sharing was very, very late in this. Was not something that people understood. It was not something, at least 10 years ago, that people were very much aware of. They weren't bothered that much by personal data yet. We did a large survey together with, I think Paul Zeef is still in the group somewhere, in 2006 under Dutch citizens, more than 500 citizens. And they were really not aware of the fact that they need to care about their data. Luckily, things have changed lately. We have GDPR, which is a great marketing instrument, and we have companies like Facebook and Cambridge Analytica that do a lot of good marketing for the fact that you need to care about your data. So the first movers 10 years ago, companies like Key, MyDex, they did a great job, but they were maybe a bit early. And we think that now is the time to take that advantage, to take that second step or third step. The second important element is trust. Who do you actually trust with your data? Why would I trust a new company that I don't know of yet to handle my data? How do I know that they do the right thing? Usually we do not. And we see quite some in the Netherlands, quite some alliances between large corporates and small personal data initiatives to create more trust. For example, there's an interesting collaboration between the Dutch Volksbank and Schloss, both present in this call, to see how they can work together. And then you see that the trust that people have in a certain large institution can be handed over to a new company, a startup company, which does a bit of the personal data management. Same thing holds, for example, for the solution Octo, which is to a part also sponsored by one of the large Dutch banks, ABN AMRO, and we also see collaboration between another Dutch bank, Rabobank, and Octo as well. So you see combinations of larger institutions that are known and have a trust brand with smaller companies. But also, in terms of trust, we have seen over and over in our surveys that government is crucial for trust. There's been one constant thing. We did a survey in 2006 and we repeated that in 2016 on who do you trust with your data. Number one ranked was, in both cases, the government. In the Dutch situation then it was. In 2006, banks were ranked quite highly as well, with being trusted with your data. In 2016 survey, those dropped quite steeply, but we didn't dive into the details, whether that was general trust in banks or whether that was in trust in my bank. There might be a difference in that. Another point of success or failure is in transparency, in creating a transparent business model. In many situations, you don't really know how the business model of the proto operator works. How do they make money? Do they make money? Is the business model sustainable? And those are questions that are quite often hard to answer from the general perspective or the general websites of those initiatives. So creating transparency in the business model and who pays for what is, in our vision, crucial in getting accepted solutions. And then we have one problem in the Netherlands, which is oh, I'm getting calls. A problem in the Netherlands, that is that we don't have a good identity infrastructure in the Netherlands yet. We have a good government identity infrastructure. It's called DigiD. It allows you to log into all government-related portals and get access to your data. We have a good identity for example, banking. It's called IDIN. Does a good job, but there's no identity that allows you to work both in a public setting as well as in a private setting. And that greatly hampers the adoption of personal data management solutions. I know the situation in many other countries in Europe is very different. In the Nordics, there's a much more liberal use of identities. In Belgium, you have a much better public-private infrastructure. In the UK, it's completely different. And there's a limited infrastructure. You do a lot of more open matching. But at least in the Netherlands, this is one of the big issues in getting adoption of personal data management solutions. Given this current situation, there are quite a few promising things in the Netherlands, and I want to go through a few of those developments, and I'd like to share them with you, and maybe also some people in the audience, if they are there, can comment as well on that if they want to say more about it. Two interesting developments. One, it is called IRMA. IRMA stands for I Reveal My Attributes, and it's a research initiative by the University of Nijmegen, and they've been working on this topic for ages. Have been working on card-based identity solutions earlier, and they now introduced an app, an open source app, which is called IRMA, and it strongly follows the self-sovereign identity philosophy, in the sense that it allows you to capture data from a data source on your phone, and through your phone you can then share that data with any party that you would like to rely on that data. And you can share the data in a way that it's completely, that also shows that the actual data, so it's signed data. For example, I can get my address from my municipality stored in my app, and then give that address to anybody who would like to use it, and it's signed by the Dutch, by your municipality, that it indeed is your address. Similarly, I can upload my diplomas, for example, the fact that I studied computer science in Eindhoven, if I were younger, but I can download it onto IRMA and then share it, for example, with my future employer who would like to have that data. So it strongly follows the self-sovereign identity philosophy. It's an app that works. It works quite nicely. It's open source, so it's possible to build upon that infrastructure and to create new, more advanced or more usable applications. And we see a lot of traction going on in the Netherlands to use that and extend that application. We also did a study for in collaboration with CITRA in the eHunt project, where we mapped the infrastructure or the model of IRMA to the eHunt blueprint. That was quite insightful as well. So it's new, but it's very, very promising. One big issue here is that self-sovereign identities in general, and IRMA specifically, does not have a sustainable business model as yet. In the business model of IRMA and many other self-sovereign identities, in this case, the supplier of the personal data has to pay to put his data or her data in the app. Whereas the importance of the data is at the data using service side. So one party in the ecosystem has to pay, the other party gets the profit. And that's something where we feel that there's a tension in the business model of these kind of solutions. It's not a sustainable business model. It may help in getting the main message across. It may help in validating the technology. It won't help in creating a sustainable ecosystem. And that's why MedMy is an interesting solution. MedMy is a trust framework, so it's not a solution. If I didn't phrase that correctly, it's a trust framework. It started by the Dutch Patient Confederation or something like, so the organization of all patients with different illnesses in the Netherlands. And they said it's so important that medical data is shared in the right way. And sharing medical data in the Netherlands has been a very, very, very sensitive topic over the last decade. We tried to introduce electronic patient files in the Netherlands, but they were blocked by the House of Lords, I would say, so the Eerste Kamer. And since then, it has been a very controversial issue, so nobody dared to touch it and do things with it. So the Dutch Patient Federation said, well, this has to change because having personal medical data flow between hospitals, between different caretakers is so important in improving your health. We have to break through that problem. So what they did is they created a technologically oriented trust framework, and they made sure that both personal health environments as well as suppliers of personal medical data would apply to it. They were strongly supported in this by the Dutch Ministry of Healthcare, with promoting the whole stuff, getting resources in there, and indeed they have they are getting more and more successful. Over 20 different personal health environments, so personal data sharing solutions for health, have been approved, and already 1 or 2 suppliers of personal health data have been approved. But that's also where we see the most resistance in the existing hospitals, where they have big infrastructures. And suppliers of those infrastructures are not too keen on opening up their data, even if it's certified by this NGO. Also, MedMy solved the problem of the business model, because business models and medical data, well, that's a very sensitive topic. You have many different commercial solutions also in the US, where medical data is gathered and also shared for example, research reasons, or where new the data creates value, and that's something that they really did not want in this situation. They didn't want anybody to have to pay for the data. It's actually forbidden in the trust framework that people pay for the data. It's an interesting starting point, of course, if you want to forbid that people pay for the data, but then who will pay for the infrastructure? Solution in this case was quite simple. The Dutch government, the Ministry of Healthcare, says that they will pay to every supplier of a personal health environment, so it's a free PGO, personal health environment, for the next 2 to 3 years. What will happen after that is not completely clear, but they at least said, well, we will start in financing this infrastructure in order to get it up and running. That, of course, led to a big push of personal health environments that wanted to be part of the whole development, because there was money to get there, but luckily also the threshold or the amount of money they got per user is limited, but it really led to a big supply of specific health proto operators. Yeah, and this is one of the latest figures that in February, so there were already 28 personal health environments that were approved under a certification program by MedMay to allow to handle medical data. So we also see that the certification that is used in this NGO is something that is very interesting. And that might also, that there might be some analogies on the role that MyData or MyData Global could play in creating trust and in creating the necessities for acceptance of operators in the ecosystem. Few other examples. Completely different nature. Government itself also is struggling with how can we actually promote in a broader sense control over your data. So we have a large Dutch program. It's called Regie op Gegevens, Control Your Personal Data. It's a logo on the left-hand side, and it tries to stimulate different solutions. It also tries to stimulate the knowledge sharing in this field. And I think that Paul Zeef was on the call some time ago. I don't know whether you are up to commenting a bit, but he's the program lead.
Yeah, it seems he is not behind his PC at the moment. I see an empty. I see a beautiful painting where Paul was before.
Okay. So.
Oh, there he is. There he is. Hi, Paul.
I don't know whether you would like to say a bit more about the program you're running, Regie op Gegevens.
Oh, I was just having a phone call, so I was distracted. I'm sorry. Do you see me, or?
I can see you and I can hear you.
And you can hear me, okay. Where shall I start? I'm just getting back to the conference.
Just a few lines on what you want to.
A few lines. Well, we have a program on what we call Regie op Gegevens, personal data management, so to say, in the Netherlands. And one of the key things that we are focusing on, and is to have more knowledge pilots, experiences exchanged in between the different sectors and between the projects that we are running in the Netherlands. So that's one part of the game, and the second is more fundamental, is that we are considering what kind of regulations we need for the element of trust. Trust in operators, trust in data, trust in the service providers who want to use your data when you're asked to give consent and the like. What is it to give consent, under what conditions? On quite a few of these aspects, we are studying and figuring out what we have to regulate within a second tranche of what is called the Dutch law on digital government. We will not proceed in a great velocity, because it's very complicated. There are already sectors in which things take place, in which other regulations are in preparation. So it's quite a job to figure out what exactly can be done and what is already implicitly or more explicitly regulated in already existing acts, and what are the guarantees that are already in place as far as trust and regulation is concerned. Yeah. And a third part of that is what kind of regulations do we have on, for instance, basic registrations, on the information household of the government, of the public sector, in which there are barriers, still juridical barriers on making the data available to citizens who want to, and who should be possible to have a right to manage their own data. We know that there are some regulations in which there is no official ground, no official fundament for the data processing to the citizen on the scale that you need for personal data management.
Yeah.
So these are three main things that we are engaged in for the coming, well, about 9 months, maybe longer. And of course, the initiative of the European Commission is triggering us as well. So we are with only a few people. Well, I hope that we can give some information in about the month of June of what kind of proposals we have for further regulation.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. And then one of the things that I learned also from you is that law is a very strange thing. There's a law on the, we have a nice registration of all addresses and where I live. It's called the basic registration of people. In the law that governs that database, it's explicitly stated that I, as a person, am not the target audience. So I'm a person, I'm not one of the allowed users of the database.
That's exactly what we are looking at. If there should be another aim formally noted in the law, it's not the answer yet, but we are studying if that should be possible, so that there is a formal fundament for processing these data to the and from the person who is registered. Because one of the main things that we have in a kind of a policy brief, policy letter, which was sent to Parliament on personal data management in July last year, is that we are very keen on accelerating the developments on personal data management, but that we are not, we don't have the ambition to how to say, to make all the rules that are already in place totally different. So we are not making a dysfunctional the base registers that we have built on for the last 15 or 20 years. Yeah. We have to figure out how the new techniques, the new processes, the new ways of dealing with your data can accommodate to how public government, public administration already functions by exchanging data behind the backs of citizens, but on a transparent way. That's in short what the accent is in the Netherlands.
So you cannot start a revolution from the Dutch ministry, but you want to create an evolution.
Yeah,
that's something to work.
Yeah.
Two developments more on a municipal side. TADA movement is in Amsterdam, development on more freely sharing of data and public access to data. I'll skip that for a moment, also given time. If I get back to the presentation. Two other developments more related to the municipal area. One is called Common Ground, and that is a revolution, or it aims at getting a revolution in the data sharing in the Dutch municipal landscape. They want to build an infrastructure they call the NLX, and basically that is, we're so inspired by the Estonian situation with the XT and the X-road infrastructure is now called XT. Why don't we have an XT in the Netherlands? So they want to introduce in a bottom-up way, in the Common Ground program, similar infrastructures, but then more oriented at personal data sharing. And then it's very interesting because it's a bottom-up development. It's not started from, for example, the Ministry of Internal Affairs or the Ministry of Health or whatever. And you see different parties working on it, but then the question is, how will these things be adopted? Who will adopt them? When will they be adopted? And when will these kinds of developments be strong enough to build upon? And a second thing that I would like to mention is the Blue Button initiative. It's not something that we invented in the Netherlands. No, it was invented actually in the States in order to make healthcare data flow in a better way. So why not introduce in the States, it was a blue button that you can download all your personal health data, started for veterans, war veterans, that they can more easily move their data from one healthcare provider to another. The concept is very appealing. I know in France, in the Mesinfo project, you've been working on it quite extensively as well. And one of the programs that we're running now is that we try to standardize this button and make all, at least municipalities, but eventually all government sites have such a blue button, so that at least I get access to my data and possibly even not only download it, but immediately upload it into the operator of choice that I'm using. So that's something that I think is very promising. It's a very simple initiative. It's not very technologically complicated. It builds upon the current identity infrastructure, but it at least gives us as a person an actionable right on data portability. So that's one of the things that we think will become big in the year to come. But then back to you in our audience. I don't know how many people we've got left in the audience. Let's see if I can get to Zoom.
81 we have.
Still doing okay. My question to you would be, what kind of interesting initiatives are there in your country, and what would you like to share? And we've put up a Mentimeter question for that. So Marlies, can you take it?
Yeah, I'll grab my share. I see we have someone that has made it. And this is an open question, so you can freely type whatever you want to say. So if you're missing initiatives, if you have interesting things that are happening at your place.
I tried to use Menti, but I think because I have high security levels on my browser, I couldn't get past the first page. So I don't know, did we run Menti through a MyData filter to see if what kind of data and security they use?
Well, we used it in the start of the meeting, and it worked quite nicely. So it then we had 40 people in it.
But I don't think we've done analysis on their MyData friendliness, John.
I think that's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to coming out of the MyData Academy. I've been noodling some thoughts. There's a term called privacy engineer, and I've been working on some standards with the IEEE on privacy engineering and how you integrate that into the software development lifecycle. That should be published later this year. I'm wondering if one of the things the MyData Academy might look is what is a MyData engineer, and how do you incorporate MyData into software development in a way that you can demonstrate to people like us that you're on side.
That's a super interesting idea. Thank you, John.
Maybe you can hide the image. That would help, Marlies. What would that do?
There we go. Looking at all sorts of settings and not the obvious one.
We have CISO ID that's mentioned quite a few times. Open passport based identity. MyData cities. Yeah, the trusted data bank. Of course, was a great great discussion there in the last MyData conference in Finland, and I think a paper on that is also forthcoming. The city of Helsinki becoming an operator, yeah, it's a very interesting development as well. So that's where the role of the data source and maybe even the data using service and the operator fall together in one city. Okay. If anybody wants to put a bit more detail on, so the DIAC initiative, can somebody say what that is? I'm not familiar with that one.
That's the Digital Identity and Access Council of Canada. It's produced the Pan-Canadian Trust Framework with reference to the stuff you were talking about earlier. It's the identity professionals and the Government of Canada are working together to produce identity frameworks that can be used in a variety of frameworks. The latest news out of DIAC is that the federal government has got some cross-operability with the Alberta and BC governments on some digital identities, and they're moving towards DIDs in some contexts. In BC, they've implemented DIDs in a commercial context. So there's some exciting stuff happening.
Okay. So we'll capture what has been going on here, and one of the call to actions that I would like to share with you also. I think we should start finding a way in sharing this type of initiatives, not only through cases, but also in another way in the academy or whatever in MyData. So we'll be opening up something in a channel to make sure that we get some place where we can share these ideas and initiatives with a short description and some links, because so much interesting stuff is going on. And here in this community, we have the people connected to those developments, whereas starting from our country or whatever, you can hardly ever get into the nitty-gritty details of it. So please keep on sharing this. Marlies, I'll take the presentation back, hopefully. Yeah, here it is. So to end my talk, I was also promised that we would speak a bit about what happened yesterday. Yesterday we had a workshop of the thematic group on what's the MyData operator, which is closely related to it. I pointed to it quite a few times in the presentation, which is closely related to the things we're talking about here. So the way that Yogi phrased it, this was the Get the Paper Out workshop, because what we are working on is a well thought through description of what the MyData operator is and what it should comply to, aiming at least also the list of the group of proto operators that we have that we have seen, in order to create a better understanding what those operators are and how they relate to the MyData principles. So it was an intense and interesting workshop yesterday. With we started out with something like 20 participants, and by the end of the day, more than 30 people were also in the audience and sharing the ideas. As I said at the start of this meeting, it was surprisingly effective how we work together, also due to the great technical preparation by Vivi and the way the content was prepared. We talked about, we focus on 4 different topics that were still open there are many topics still open, but 4 were so important. One was on the relation of between the MyData principles to the operators. Second one was on the role of the operator, whether it was a neutral role or it was a fiduciary role to the person. We talked about the ways to visualize the important aspects of the operator, and we also talked about how we can work towards interoperability starting from such a paper. So what would be the roadmap in creating interoperability between operators? Also links back to some of the questions that we had in an earlier meeting. So we had intense discussions building upon the current paper, and the idea is that after this workshop we'll be publishing the full paper on April the 22nd. So the final content will be ready on April 16th in order to do some polishing. We have an editorial team that is in charge of making sure that all the contributions that we greatly appreciate and would like to encourage you to do, that make sure that all those comments will be added in the correct way. It's a team consisting of Vivi, Joss, Yogi, Marlies, and myself. And if you're interested also to listen or to comment, we'll have weekly calls on Wednesday to discuss progress, and focuses on writing and creating this final paper and getting it out and being able to celebrate on April the 22nd. Probably again in a virtual way, but we'll definitely celebrate the fact that we arrive at good description of the operator ecosystem. And we also invite proto operators to read through it and to share their comments and also to support this development towards increased interoperability in the end of operators and increased interoperability in the whole ecosystem as discussed earlier. See you on Slack with respect to these developments. And that's it as far as I'm concerned.
All right. Thank you, Will. Yeah, I noticed there were some questions, but concerning the time, I would suggest you look through the chat and maybe answer them one-on-one. I've surely noticed them and noted them down, so we'll get back to them. I see some posts as well about the case library. So yes, there is indeed a channel, and there's being actively worked on cases that are published. The link was posted there as well. Be sure to get in touch with Vivi, and I believe Stella as well, who's working on that. For now, it's time for a break again. We'll be back here at 3 o'clock, and then Stella will be hosting some pitches from the community, so from you guys, starting from 3 o'clock. So be sure again to actually stand up, stretch, and take your breaks, and see you back in 7 minutes.